Hello Australia and welcome to the BAP. It is the 29th of April 2018. My name is Franco and joining me a full complement of the BAP. Gentlemen.
How are we
doing?
Yes, not too bad. Not too
I'm
bad. Wow.
here this time. I'm not just drinking and playing board games.
That's right. It's amazing how slack we've been, considering now we don't even have to leave the house.
It's true.
In the last few months.
It's true. I mean, it's almost like it encourages slackness.
Well, yeah, the world of being slack is a bottomless pit, really, isn't it? You can never hit rock bottom. Were you victorious in your board gaming?
Well, sort of. My friend got so drunk he could no longer play the game. So I was winning at that point, but up until that point, as he got progressively more drunk, there was probably a point where it became a very unfair contest. I can drink a shit ton of whiskey, and Zeke can't. He had like 1.25 liters of the stuff over the course of the game.
Wow!
So no.
He ended up passing out on the train, getting picked up by the police, and getting a lovely escort home.
Oh, really?
To make sure he got home safe because he was so drunk that the cops took pity on him.
Wow. Did you manage to get to work the next day?
Yeah, it's fine.
Well done, sir. And that's how you take on a superpower.
Well, look, I was playing Russia, so that's how you got to do it.
I can win the game when my mate is illegally drunk.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, I didn't realize he was getting that hammered. He seemed fine up until the next day.
I gotta appreciate the game. I gotta appreciate the game.
This is how the US beat Russia by excess.
Yeah.
And thus,
and it was the reverse, I guess, when we played our little game of Axis and Allies. Although I was America and Russia, I beat Germans by just getting them so drunk they couldn't take on Russia.
That's it.
So, gentlemen, what's been happening in the culture space?
Well, I haven't been here for ages, so I've actually got stuff to talk about for Douchebag, which is great.
Talk away.
Oh, cool.
Have you guys caught up to Silicon Valley without TJ Miller?
No.
I have not even started Silicon Valley.
Like at all?
At all.
Wow.
I think I've seen like one episode somewhere along the line, but that's about it.
It's good.
Yeah, I've heard that. I don't know why.
It's very close to home sometimes, though, but it's good. I don't know. Working in IT and writing software in IT, this show
I think there's too much PTSD involved in watching that show for me.
Maybe. But I was worried it wouldn't be the same without TJ Miller because obviously he's a big personality and it's a big role to fill. But I haven't missed him so far. They've actually covered for it pretty well. I don't know how long they're going to last, losing their biggest star, but they seem to be doing all right so far.
I saw a bit of interesting information about TJ Miller in regards to that show, and apparently he wasn't necessarily the best person to work with in terms of work ethics, so he would often turn up quite late and inebriated at times.
Stand up, like any kind of interviews he does, I can totally get that. He seems like, I think he would habitually be either drunk or stoned or high on something or just late or forgetting things. So I can understand why people would have a problem. He
said it was due to him performing outside of the show, so he'd be doing stand-up till 3 o'clock in the morning and then trying to get to, the set. I'm sure he was still drinking and getting stoned. But
he was a stand-up comedian before he was on the show, was he?
Yes. You should see some of his wacky stuff.
He's trying to maintain both lifestyles.
Yeah. He's since gone on to do a bunch of movies. He's moved to New York City to do more stand-up, and so obviously it would be a bigger commute to get back to LA to film. And so he dropped from the show. In a mutual decision, which I don't know how mutual it really is, but in all the interviews he talks it up like he was.
Because I'm really not familiar with who he is. Is he like the main character or the draw card?
Have you seen Deadpool?
I have seen Deadpool, but
okay, the ginger-haired, frizzy-haired guy, that's TJ Miller, and in Silicon Valley he is not the main. He's not the main guy. He's the guy that owns the house everyone lives in, and he's just an asshole. He's one of the business partners, but he's not a major player.
But he is probably the funniest guy.
He's the funniest. He's the funniest guy. He's not. My favorite guy is Jimmy O Yang's character called Jin Yang.
Yeah.
Just because of the way he and Ehrlich bounce off each other. But next to Jin Yang, Ehrlich is the funniest. And Jin Yang's not fun.
I think I'll have to brave just. I don't know. Drink heavily one night and maybe wade into a few episodes of that or something. And
I just YouTube for it and find the dick scene.
Yeah.
I think that from season 1. If you don't like that, you won't like the show.
don't bother.
Yeah.
Don't bother. Okay.
Basically,
It's the best joke from season 1.
they scientifically break down what it would take to jerk off everyone in an audience. It's sounds weird, but it's quite funny the way it all plays
Yeah,
out.
I'll check it out.
It's a bunch of nerds just trying to do the maths on how they go about it. It's very good. It's very good.
That's how I got into the show. I watched that and went, yeah, I'm going to check this show out.
Yeah. If you watch that and you like it, you'll like the rest of the season.
Yes.
Because that is sort of the kind of humor it delivers. The other thing I've done is caught up on Billions. One of my all-time favorite shows is back for season 3, and it's fucking fantastic as always. It's up there. It's like The Americans and Billions are my 2 favorite sort of dramas.
Okay. Well, what in particular about Billions draws you?
Okay, so have I spoken about Billions?
You have.
Okay, so there's just all these characters who are shades of grey, like the district attorney who's trying to prosecute this millionaire guy who runs a venture capital firm. Like no one's a particularly good person, and everyone has all this shit going on, and it's just very well written. And the lengths to which they go to fuck each other over is just wonderful. And this season has been pretty strong. One of my favourite characters on the show, Taylor, is a female to male trans individual. Actress is as well. Actor, I should say. And just all of that is just played beautifully as like not even being an important element of the character. And I just love it. I love how progressive the show is and everything they do. And Taylor plays Netrunner, so it makes me happy.
I wonder how much that Netrunner really counts in on this. Actually,
Well,
I'm
no,
trying to think.
this is the first season where that's come up when Taylor went to a Netrunner contest, and I was like, "Fuck yeah, Netrunner!"
Are there any genuinely sympathetic characters in there? I mean,
Yeah, no, you definitely feel sympathy towards individuals, but the very next moment they'll do something so inherently dickish. Did you just get angry at them again?
Yeah, I haven't tried that one either.
I would recommend it. There's a very few shows I would recommend people, but
I mean, I like the
Billions is up
cast
there.
who's in it. Paul Giamatti
is fantastic.
and I can't remember the other guy's name, but he's always good in most stuff he's in. Anyway, he's normally the ginger dude. I can't remember his name.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. The guy who plays Bobby Axelrod, but I can't remember the name of the actor.
He's from Homeland, isn't he?
He was too. Yeah, he was the bad guy.
Mm. Spoiler alert.
I actually got into it because I was just looking at. I think I just watched Watchmen again for like whatever the 11th, 12th, 15th time, and I saw that Malin Ackerman, I think is the actress's name, who plays Silk Spectre. She was in this new show, and I was like, "Oh, check this out!" And it was just fucking great. And she's a bit part, but you know, there were things that drag you in.
Well, I've been catching up on a Franco recommendation.
Good.
And only just started doing it yesterday. And I don't know how many episodes it is, but that Wild Wild Country documentary. And it's been blowing my mind, Franco.
Well, I wasn't expecting that. I thought it was.
Well, the weird thing is I'm old enough to remember when the Orange people came to Perth.
Yes.
And I distinctly, it's one of the memories from my teenage years that is pretty distinct because my family had very distinct opinions.
Well, I don't think it was just your family. I think WA wide.
No, WA in general, definitely. Like we were united. We did not want these people. Yeah. And it was just as a teenager, I noticed it, and that's probably one of the few things of political nature that I did notice at that time. And I'll tell you what, I had a genuine bad feeling about the Orange people, but watching this series, I'm going like, man, they got shafted.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
they got absolutely shafted, and then got spiteful themselves, and then got shafted again.
Well, I'd be careful to sort of accept from the way this show's laying out what's happened necessarily is that's was the, you know, unequivocal facts of the situation.
No,
So you got to be
absolutely.
careful with
That's
that.
something I wanted to get your opinion on because it did seem fairly like it seemed really sympathetic to them.
Yeah, I think
right?
you watched this to see the reality as the two opposing sides saw it, not necessarily that is exactly what
Yeah,
went down.
but
So,
man, some of the people on the other side were just bloody-minded individuals. So,
oh, yeah.
so for anyone who doesn't remember, it's like the the Rajneesh were a religious group, and their spiritual center was the Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, and they formed up over decades,
Yeah.
starting off fairly small in India. And then this documentary, sort of Wild Wild Country, takes you from their beginnings, or not from their beginnings, but before they moved to the US and things like that. And and they've pretty much. I'm only up to episode 4, so I'm not even sure how it ends. And it's something I'm familiar with that I don't have any idea what happened to them in the end. I know that that when they were buying up land in America, they were also trying to buy up land here in Pemberton. And the locals down there just reacted. It's fantastic. The locals there reacted quite violently to it.
I sent you guys a link. It's got 100% critic rating on Rotten Tomatoes.
Oh, wow.
Oh, right. Awesome.
Not one critic has rated it any less than a fucking
well,
perfection.
because it does seem to. This is why I'm inclined to think they got railroaded, is because it does seem to be just portraying both sides as they see it.
Well, there's definitely
the way I see it, they got railroaded.
there was definitely an aversion to their lifestyle. You know, whether that was fair or not. There was definitely
one of those cases where once they set up in their little city on the river that they were going to have, no one probably would have fucking heard from them.
Well, that's the thing. Yes, they sort of seem to have brought the retribution upon themselves in the way that the Rajneesh retaliated, particularly under the.
They were buying up land there, buying up land in Pemberton. It's a shame they didn't say much more about the Pemberton thing. I was kind of interested in that, but they did show a few news clips where the famous tough titties.
Yes.
Phrase came out, and she really gave Mike Willesee a serve, man. I was quite fucking happy about that, actually.
And it's interesting whether was she a product of the Rajneesh or Bhagwan, or was she just a singular individual who was mad on power and sort of pushed this commune to a certain direction that it otherwise wouldn't have gone.
Yeah, and that's right. I mean, they've got her. They're talking to Sheila directly in this documentary and getting her direct word story, and it is fairly. I found it quite sympathetic. Like she was going, "Well, we were just trying to do this, and they were threatening our very existence." And so she had to do something. And
but that's
she
her.
Just happened to be...
But you always got to take that into perspective. That's the reality as she sees it. Whether that's
no, that's what I mean. Yeah. That's what I mean. And I totally believe that she saw it that way.
Yes.
That's
indeed.
Where I'm coming from. Whereas the guy on the other side who just made up accusations of them poisoning the water supply with salmonella or something like that, just made that shit up. That's, I mean, they present that perspective, and that was just clearly made up, and there was nothing to it. There was no evidence whatsoever, and even the people on his side were saying he was mad and stuff like that.
It was interesting to see both sides and how they saw and how they sort of vindicated what they were doing.
Yeah, it was weird though. But I swear so as they're moving in the small township of like previously 40 people, just didn't like the fact that 19 miles away there was going to be this
people doing their own thing, but they just didn't like that they were doing their own thing.
Doing the most American thing possible.
Yes. No, can't have that here.
Yeah. And the reactionary sort of views that came out of it, I mean, this is why I'm totally sympathetic. It's like they started doing things that did look like it was going to threaten the existence of the group, or at least where they decided to settle.
Yes.
And so they reacted, and they reacted within the law.
Yeah, it was very interesting. So they just wanted to set up their own commune and do their own thing and be left alone, and which is what most of the people around that area wanted to do, is be left alone. And yet, for the people, the town sort of went out of their way to make it hard for them. It was bizarre.
Dicks.
Yeah.
And so where it was, where they decided to, they managed to get enough people registered as residents that they took over the town council.
Yeah.
And when they did that, the only thing I could see, which was a bit nasty, they kind of spiked the ball because they then renamed the town and renamed all the streets. And it's like, oh man, you're just being dicks. They won the battle and then they just went and fucking spiked the ball like that. And I'm going, oh, that's not gonna help me.
Yeah. But yeah, definitely an interesting documentary. I'm still getting through it because.
But yeah, it's so
How
what I'm
many
blown
episodes
away
is it?
with.
Is it just one episode or?
Well, I'm up to episode 4, and I don't know how many there are. So
Yeah, they're an hour long, so that does take a bit of time.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, as I said, the thing that's blown my mind about it is how I had one very conventional view that was given to me via the media in Perth, and that was the only view I had of this group.
yeah,
Right
so
up until the moment
Weird,
as I
that
saw
would be
this.
wrong.
Yeah, I know. And and I was just like, I got totally flipped when I was watching this story because I thought, hey, these people really weren't doing anything particularly bad at all.
no, I
Why
mean,
the hell were people getting so bent out of shape about it? It was crazy.
and that side of it was interesting for me because I was a bit younger than you when they were around, so I remember them, but I didn't really understand what it was.
Oh, people just. When you'll appreciate this, Dean. They flashed up during the documentary another cultural moral hazard or moral panic image. It was 2 D&D books they flashed up during the. Well, then they're doing a bit of a montage of cults and stuff like that.
I remember when I was in high school, someone's mother made them burn their D&D books because it was the tool of the devil.
Yeah, I remember hearing a lot of similar stuff as well. And I had a mate.
One of my friends.
I had a mate who had to hide that he played it from his parents.
Yeah, and he refused to hang out with us after that. He was like, "I'm sorry, I can't. My mum thinks you're devil worshippers." It's like, wow,
yeah, it's
your
kind
mum's
of heavy.
an idiot.
Exactly.
I feel your pain. Fuck.
And once again, that's the opinion I have of all these people of this town and what they were trying to do to the poor old Orange people.
Yeah.
What I found interesting was
Play Dungeons and Dragons with them.
The other aspect they covered slightly was how people would just, like professional people who just had enough of the rat run, would go, right, I'm off to an ashram in India. And it's like, that's really interesting because they're sort of checking out of life and going to a simpler existence, that's not adhering to to standard social norms. So they're not being monogamous, so it's not hurting anyone, and just a different.
That's still a bridge too far for a lot of people.
Yeah, and that's what it was.
Came up during the same-sex marriage debate. What's next? Like polygamy? It's like, well, honestly, I don't give a shit.
I don't give a shit. Why do you?
That's next. Fine. Like, I don't care. I'm not gonna tell someone how to live their life.
Yeah.
What if they want to marry a dog, Dean? Okay, I don't care. I mean, that's weird. But fucking
if they can get the dog signed consent, then they can do it. But they have to get that signed consent.
Yeah.
Put your paw here, sir. And your initial here.
Woof.
Slobber on the line.
This is terrible. This is taking a dark turn. Yeah. And once again, Franco, actually, I don't know. As I said, I haven't finished watching it, but there was something you made a comment. Is you're interested in knowing how they made their money?
Yes.
And it is interesting. I'm not sure how they did it either, but except that they did seem to know how to make decent investments and things, but then it sounded like at times maybe they didn't have that much money because he had Hollywood people raising money for him and stuff like that.
It's unclear.
It wasn't entirely clear, but it sounded like, given the fact that everyone was just doing the work on the commune anyway, they didn't need much money probably.
No, but the guys,
they were kind of set up.
He still had 100 Rolls Royces, so there's got to be cash coming from somewhere.
20.
Was it 20?
20. It started as 17, and the famous thing where they were saying, it said that he's got 17, and she turned around, and she was in this thing where she was deliberately goading the media, and she was saying, yes, and it'll be 20 by next week, and shit like that. I mean, she was sticking it. She was really giving him her finger for a lot of those press appearances.
Yeah.
Didn't make any friends, but I'm just looking at it going, fucking hell, I would love her if she was doing that now. I think she was the best thing to be just walking up to these things and going, we're doing what we want to do now. Shove it. It's almost anarchic, but it wasn't. It was very authoritarian.
It's amazing what a little perspective in history can do, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, this was at a time when Bill Cosby was viewed as, Mr. American Family, like an icon.
Yeah, and she was this foreign villain that was coming over to Australia. The media just went to town on her. for no and I remember at the time even thinking not entirely sure what they were doing wrong. I was a teenager and I was like, I'm not sure why they're bad, but apparently they're bad.
Yeah, it's the polygamy thing. And also, America's not really big on non-Christians, really.
No, because that's one of the things when they have they have the idea of them taking over a town, challenging the state legislature because they're saying it's a mix of church and state because you shouldn't have that many people of one religion determining who's controlling becomes the councillors in a town. I'm thinking, but they're describing just about every rural town in America when it comes to Protestantism or something like that, or you know what I mean? It's
yeah, they just don't want to be outnumbered.
yeah, it has to be that religion, not any other religion. That's all.
In the end,
I mean, and once again, that's something that is now not an issue because you've got essentially Muslim cities in certain parts of the states now.
Careful pointing that out.
No, Dearborn, Michigan is well known as like having the largest Muslim population or something like that. So, I mean,
but if anyone out there's listening from the alt-right, Jason, they may not realise that.
Oh, I've doxed Muslims, unfortunately.
Doxed Muslims.
Oh, I'm sorry, brothers.
Shit. It's all your fault what happens from here. I'm going to check that out tonight. I'm gonna check that
it's well worth it.
Sounds
it's
awesome.
well worth it. I can't rave about it enough. It's been a bit of a blast.
Clearly not.
I got another minor recommendation for you guys. So, not as intellectually pure as the Wild Country, but I don't know. For some reason, this particular show has caught my interest when I want to be a bit more brain dead in my viewing enjoyment. It's another documentary series. Well, what do you call it? Not mockumentary. Anyway, it'll come to me. It's called The Fastest Car on Netflix. And it's it basically
wait, it's called The Fastest Car on Netflix, or it's called The Fastest Car?
It's called Fastest Car.
It is on Netflix.
It is on Netflix. Yes.
Because it'd be funny if it was like The Fastest Car on Netflix. It's like, that's a very specific genre.
Yeah, I haven't seen this one yet, Franco, but I have seen the promotional material for it, and I think I know where you're going.
So basically, it covers 4 different people who meet up at the end of the show to do a drag race. And one of the cars is a supercar, and the other 3 are what they call sleeper cars. But what makes it interesting is that they actually find out about these people. So it revolves around their passion for cars, but who they are and how they got to where they are. And at times it can be quite interesting. I know it's shot really well. It's not the most intellectual of pursuits, but I don't know, in terms of people drama, it's interesting and light entertainment.
And there's some pretty sweet rides.
I guess so, but I don't find that the most interesting aspect of the show. Just, watching these people's enthusiasm and passion for their hobby and their cars is interesting, and also the trials and tribulations that they experience during their life to get to where they are. So it's not purely a car show; it's a people drama, I would say.
People drama happens to have cars.
Yes.
Yeah, cool. I'll try to check it out. The Wild Country actually came up as a recommendation for me on Netflix after watching something, and I just assumed it was like some country and western. Why the fuck would I want to watch that?
Exactly. It's a terrible piece of marketing.
Yeah. I am sort of shocked to find out that it's not. I thought it was like maybe it's the story of Willie Nelson or something. I was like, fuck, wow, I don't need to know that.
It is a very misleading title that gives nothing away of what it's about.
Yeah, it's true.
Too funny.
Oh, that's me for culture.
I'm pretty much douchebag filtered out. I did just finish watching Star Wars Rebels though, and I know you guys don't watch it, but it was fucking great.
Is that the cartoon?
Yeah. It was the fucking great cartoon. It's a bit kiddie at times, but it was still really good.
Yeah, I've been meaning to watch that and Clone Wars too.
I haven't seen all of Clone Wars. Yeah, I stopped that one. Apparently it gets really good, but Star Wars Rebels got really good by the end.
It started pretty good.
Seasons. Yeah, it started good, got really good towards the end. So, looking forward to their next one. They've announced a live action show and another animation as well on the new Disney streaming service, which will be interesting to see how that all goes. Is anyone still watching Lost in Space, or have you all given up on it?
I haven't even watched it yet.
No,
okay, I gave up.
I haven't gone back to it. I got maybe 3 episodes in. I'm not sure. It was 2 or 3 episodes in.
That's about where I think you and I were talking about this last
Yeah.
time we caught up, where it was like those fucking fuel eels, and then that was it. We both
Yeah,
figured
that's
out.
right. The fuel eels. The fuel eels. I mean, really.
And I'm
Yeah,
done.
that was. I think you distilled the reason perfectly. I was willing to. I was letting him get away with a fair few things. Yeah, but the fuel eels was just. Is that really necessary? Are you that fucking lazy?
They needed a disaster, and they just came up with like a really shitty one.
I know fuel eels. They live in water all their fucking life, but they feed off these fucking fuel cells somehow.
Yep.
That's it.
So you're pretty much telling me don't waste my time with the show.
Unfortunately, it seems that way.
Okay.
I didn't realize that that's what made me give up. But when Dean said it, I went, "Yep, that's the reason."
Yeah, I was curious if it got any better because I have no intention of going back. But
no, that was the last episode I watched. So
yeah, fair enough. Anyway, that's me done. That's my douchebag filter done. I just wanted to check what the status was on Lost in Space, if he jettisoned it or not.
It's lost. It's gone.
That's the first sort of Netflix original series that I can think of that I was like, miss.
Hang on,
Because normally they're pretty good.
Yeah, what was that one that kicked off that had the really good fight choreography, and it was in some weird future?
That was not Netflix. That was AMC, and it was that.
Oh yeah,
one.
I love that show.
That was good.
Into the Badlands, maybe.
Yes, Badlands.
I hadn't got back into the second. Is there a second season?
Yes, there is.
Sure. I don't know. I stopped watching that when I stopped watching Walking Dead. But not because Badlands was at fault. Just that Walking Dead pissed me off so much that I just went off of all AMC content. And I was like, no, I'm done. I'm a break.
Yeah, no, I've watched the first 2 seasons.
I stopped watching Walking Dead, probably, which was a.
You still watch Fear the Walking Dead, right?
No, well, I haven't for the last 6 months. So, but now I notice there's all these videos coming out on YouTube saying, "Hey, this is when Walking Dead lost all its audience," and I'm going, "Oh, it's probably when I gave up."
Yeah, it's season 7, the one when I gave it up to. I saw the same thing. It's like, yeah, that was it for me. But to be fair, for about 2 seasons before that, I was pretty close to stopping. But
yeah, I mean, I want to see. There's a few episodes. I'll probably get bored one day just to see how many that. Whatever else they do. Apparently, Carl's going to die, so you know.
He has died apparently. I saw an article that said that Morgan was moving over to Fear the Walking Dead.
This is true.
That's right, because I did try to. I got my parrot and went on a jaunty adventure. And I was trying to watch Fear the Walking Dead earlier this week, and that was the opening of the season opener was Morgan turning up.
All right.
Is this?
Yeah, fair enough.
In terms of timings, is this after he's left The Walking Dead? Or was it before he met up with the Walking Dead crew?
I don't know. I don't know how it quite finishes, but it would seem that he has made over a pretty decent distance to get from one scene to the other. So I don't know what the time frame is.
Okay, because I'm wondering, is it before or after he's Kung Fu Master?
Oh, he's Kung Fu Master.
Okay, so it has to be after then.
Yeah.
Well, he could just be mid Kung Fu mastery. You know, wandering the landscape.
No,
that doesn't. They weren't wandering that long. They weren't wandering long enough for him to become a master in the first place, let alone wander around for another few years after.
Well, he became Kung Fu Master as part of.
Kung Fu, the Legend Continues, so.
He was.
Yeah, he did it in record time.
Yeah. He did not go on any adventures
it turns
to
out
Mexico.
When there's not much else to do, Kung Fu is very easy to master.
Well, I mean, and here's an interesting theory. I don't think, like, The Walking Dead may be 8 seasons old, but it's not 8 years in elapsed time.
No.
Apparently, until there's a big leap forward in time in this season, actually. But before
it
that,
always blows me away when they because Game of Thrones is the same deal, but those children age too fast, and the same thing's true of Carl.
Yeah,
like it feels like 8 years past because Carl is not a kid.
Carl turned into a fucking beanpole.
Yeah.
There was just no disguise. You've got a fucking basketball player trying to play a fucking 12-year-old. Yeah. Okay. We just extended douchebag buffer.
Yeah, I'm done now. I'm officially out of douchebag. Let's move on. I'm fine. Yeah.
All right. We got boys. I've been working all weekend, so I've got no news. That's the news.
It may all be douchebag buffer today.
What about? I've got a couple.
Hmm.
I mean,
okay, good.
Jesus
good
Christ,
on you.
At least 2 things have happened globally, which are pretty fucking big, right? One, Korea.
Mm-hmm.
Kim Jong-un and Moon Jae-in shake hands, do a little dance, have a bit of a hug, stand on one side of the line, stand on the other side of the line. agree to restart the peace process in Korea, we may yet live to see a unified Korea. That's pretty cool.
No.
Yeah, that is pretty cool.
I mean, that war's been going on since MASH started.
Yeah.
At least
I thought that joke fell flat then. I was like, Jesus, surely you realize I've taken
At
the
least Smash started.
Yeah, at least since MASH started.
I laughed at some sense of obligation to the reference.
No,
Right.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah. But that was
yeah,
pretty huge.
That is pretty huge. And
you
they're
see-
trying to. There's
You
still
see
people
Trump have a
trying
bit of a
to
tanty over the, they might get peace, but it doesn't mean we're going to, be okay with it.
Well, there's the interesting thing is that everyone was saying what a wonderful. Not everyone actually. A lot of people saying what a wonderful thing it is. A lot of people finding fault with it somehow as well.
Hmm.
But then defense stocks taking a dive on Wall Street.
Yeah. I mean, I'm guessing probably no
I'm,
war.
I'm guessing they spend a fair bit over there. So
Yeah, I was wondering how much influence Emperor for Life Xi Jinping had on the process. Because, Korea has basically, North Korea, I should say, has basically one ally, which is China. And I'm guessing maybe a little bit of pressure being applied there.
That might have been actually. In which case, good for them.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah,
But I mean, and this is the kind of noise they've been making, where China may turn out to be the new world power that steps in and polices certain disputes and things like that. And you know what? They can't do a worse job than the US. So if someone's going to do it, they might as well.
And
be
they
them
also,
giving it a shot.
the one thing I like about it is they have said nothing about it.
No,
There's
that's
no
right.
bragging, no nothing. It's just like, oh, the problem's solved. And
No Twitter. No Twitter.
no one's entirely sure who did it, except for it wasn't Trump because he's been bitching about it.
Yeah.
So when he could have just been like, mission accomplished.
No, that's fantastic. If they are involved, that would be awesome.
And then the other thing I thought, which was pretty fucking funny, was this week when U.S. President Donald Trump called into, I think it was Morning Joe or Fox and Friends or one of those shows on Fox, where he spoke for half an hour bitching about the ongoing probes, and then admitted live on air that he was very aware that Cohen was handling the Stormy Daniels case, even though he had previously said that he had no knowledge of what was going on in that regard.
Does this really matter? Does
I
it
don't know,
really-
man.
If we
Well,
catch him out
like,
in a
by
lie
that
like
afternoon,
does it
by
even
that
matter?
by that afternoon, there were legal filings based on his admissions on air.
Oh,
So
wow.
it does matter. It finally
Yeah.
does.
Maybe it does. I don't know if it does, but there were legal filings filed that afternoon
Okay.
because he clearly admitted to lying in the past.
Well, that's
which
more
I thought
consequence they've managed to
everyone
get
knew
out of any of his lies before. So
that
that's not
Donald
bad.
does. Yeah, but that's his thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Don't trust anything he says because most of it's lies.
A lie within a
Yeah,
lie.
that's right. Maybe he can go and legitimately claim, look, there's no way they could possibly expect truthfulness from me.
Yeah. I'm not known for
on
my
earth would that
truthfulness.
why would that be an expectation, a reasonable expectation? Clearly, this.
So I thought that was pretty cool. Anyway, those two were the big sort of global things. And then the local news that I thought was pretty funny was around the Banking Royal Commission, which has been going on sort of the past 3 weeks while I haven't been on the show. But for once, Barnaby Joyce was obviously out in front of the issue, admitting he was wrong for opposing it. And, he was shocked by the revelations. And then shortly after that, Malcolm eventually decided that, it was a political mistake to reject it. For 18 months, I might add. And then he tried to paint a picture where he was right to do it because obviously the priority was on getting reforms in place, which it clearly worked so very well. And then the last people to ever cross that line were Scott Morrison and Kelly O'Dwyer. And only begrudgingly, Kelly O'Dwyer was on Insiders again this week where she basically
we
apologized
had
for everything that happened the week before. And
we
with the
had the
benefit of
clip
hindsight,
about
she was
dodging.
sorry.
the clip was that Kelly O'Dwyer that was
It
dodging
was.
the question last
Yeah.
time?
Yeah.
And that was awesome.
That was her, and that was the very day that Malcolm Turnbull admitted, that it was a mistake, and then she was just left basically hanging there, looking fucking
High
stupid,
and dry.
just for holding the government's line. But the other thing I thought was interesting is that Malcolm Turnbull this week announced the potential penalties for any criminal charges leveled against individuals and organisations. So individuals could face up to 10 years in jail, and organisations could lose up to 10% of their annual turnover, which honestly, I got to say, is a bit weak. 10% of their turnover.
10% of the turnover could be, I don't know, but that does not sound like slap on the wrist. That sounds
Yeah, I feel like if you fuck with people and take their money, you should lose all of that money you fucked with that should be paid for compensation and then get fines on top of that.
Yeah, but to be honest, it's the jail time that I think is the real incentive. The real
It's definitely an incentive to change behaviours. But
yeah. And yeah, sure. If there's reparations to make, then let's get it out of the company.
You got to think that I think it was the NAB boss that stood down after he admitted that they knowingly lied to ASIC.
Yeah.
You've got to think he's going to be doing it all the time. Like, he's not going to be having a good weekend.
No.
He's already stood down from immunization, but he's fucked.
Let's not count our chickens before they're hatched. I mean,
oh yeah, it's true.
These guys can get away with shit. It's amazing what they can end up getting away with. But what do you know? Maybe he'll just move back to Hong Kong.
Maybe. Yeah.
Somewhere
with the non-extradition treaty. We'll have another chase
I don't know.
moment.
Yeah. That's right. Somewhere where it's painful, and they just go, well, let's not bother.
Yeah. Was it Spain that Skase went to? I can't remember.
He went to Spain.
He went to Mallorca.
Mallorca, right. Seems like that's the place to go.
I probably agree, actually. It probably wouldn't be bad.
So, and then even more locally, there was another thing this week I saw, which was basically Malcolm Turnbull in town looking to buy some votes, which I thought was interesting considering the next election is... He keeps saying it's 2019. The absolute latest day he could do is mid-May, I think, actually. But he's in town trying to buy votes with, I think it was $3.2 billion worth of funding for WA.
Oh,
wow.
To act as a bit of a top-up for our raw deal on the GST.
Mm-hmm.
What are they going to spend that on, I wonder?
Well, luckily I have written a list. 500 million was going towards the long-delayed Allenbrook train line. I should mention at this point in time... Ellenbrook, yeah. At this point in time, I've just realised I've stopped writing figures down against the rest of the bullet points. The first one as well.
I didn't think that was even a settled deal. I thought they were still trying to figure out.
Well, it's something that has been proposed by both both parties when they were in state government, but no one could ever fund it.
Oh, okay. So this
Malcolm's come through and said the federal government will fund it, and then obviously all of the funding they'd previously agreed on. I think it's 1.2 billion for Metronet. And then they're going to extend the Armadale line down to Byford, and they're going to relocate the Midland train station. Unfortunately, it'll still be in Midland, so it's still going to be a shithole. But I guess it's closer to the shops and not so much where it is now. But at least Metronet gives us a couple of circle routes. So you get the Circle Line North and the Circle Line South. So if you don't need to go into the city, you can go around.
So we may be getting a drastically improved public transport.
Oh, we fucking need it, man. Like every time I go on the freeway to go north or south in PCAR, it's a fucking car park, and it's not gonna last. Like they've got to do something, and they've got to do it quick. 10 years from now, it's gonna be fucking ridiculous. And
being someone, I mean, there was I sort of lived without a car for for about a year or so actually.
Yeah.
But I was in a very convenient place, like where a central hub of the public transport where I could get anywhere fairly easily. But if you're off any of the train lines, then
yeah, you're in trouble.
Kind of stuff.
I mean, I've been doing that for 12 months due to pure laziness. Like I have a car, but it is not licensed. And I'm just fortunate that I live in the middle of Vic Park and I can walk. Like it's easy to get places, but if it was anywhere else, I would have to get off my ass and do something about that.
That's right. Yeah.
My white privilege wouldn't cover me. So when Malcolm was in town, he also went on to say that people are interested in congestion-busting infrastructure. They want to know the government is supporting him. The big difference between me and Bill Shorten is that all of my policies support more investment, more employment, more jobs, and the runs are on the board already. Fuck's sake, Malcolm, you can't even make an announcement without trying to stick it to Bill Shorten.
Exactly the same. Apart from that, exactly the same.
Yeah, we're basically the same.
That's the big difference.
Bill's in the banker's pocket just like I am. He had to be dragged kicking and screaming for 2 years to get to a royal commission. You know, obviously he can't control his party. He's being sniped at from the back benches. Oh, clearly the same. Fuck's sake. I don't know why they're trying to play the man on Bill Shorten. He's boring. Boring. Bill Shorten is so boring. But just like it's not the man people are voting for. It's you, Malcolm. You're the problem.
Yeah, but I think their marketing research would suggest that playing the man on Bill Shorten resonates with the coalition's base because they
it does, but he's just boring as shit. Like who cares?
Oh, I never thought of that. It doesn't win them voters.
It basically takes the stench off the voters' nose of Malcolm. So Malcolm say, "Look at Malcolm. Don't worry about how much I stink."
Sorry,
don't look at Bill.
Like to anyway.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, just. I mean, I would take anyone over Bill Shorten. Anyone,
Yes.
pretty much anyone. Not Tony Abbott or Malcolm Turnbull or Scott Morrison, but you know, within reason.
Dutton.
Jesus. All right, not Peter Dutton either.
The bench is deep, Dean.
The bench of shit is deep in the coalition. Yeah.
Billy
but,
Bishop.
I mean,
Billy Bishop, I would take.
I would, I'd give her a chance.
Yeah,
She would at least be competent, right? She would at least be
Yeah.
competent. She'd be heartless, soulless, but she'd be competent.
Yeah, she'd be like the Grand Moff Tarkin of Australian politics, you know. Heartless, soulless, but efficient.
Exactly. At least the trains would run on time. That's how
Yeah.
fascism is born, isn't it?
Good old Malcolm was able to acknowledge that WA voters were deeply unhappy with their GST share. Looked like he can read a room. He's acknowledged that changes need to be made, but it's really difficult getting the other states to agree to give up their money. So he doesn't know when that's going to be fixed. Which I thought, you know, just could you look any more ineffective, Malcolm? You could just try and make, oh, I can't do it. Like, what am I going to do? I'm only the fucking Prime Minister.
Could you maybe try to open this jar on TV while you're making
Yeah.
that speech? Unsuccessfully open this jar.
I would have, yeah. I mean, we recently had our GST share bumped up from, I think it was 34 cents to 47 cents. I'd be talking, you know, as much as I could to sort of make that sound a bit better than he was. But anyway, the other thing is,
I think the argument is when it's under parity, there's just no good news to be made.
well, yeah. I
You know
mean,
what I mean?
you're right. We get less than 50 cents back in the dollar, and
Yeah.
and the other states are a lot better off. I mean, New South Wales is 85 cents. That's the next lowest.
Oh wow.
And then Victoria's 98 cents, and then everyone else is above parity.
Yeah, that's a hard argument to make when you start bringing any of those figures into play.
Yeah.
They don't look good to either
Well,
side.
there's some pretty serious seats on the line here. So I mean, Pierce electorate, which is Christian Porter's seat, is potentially going to be lost. So their Attorney General might be out. Many look to Christian Porter as like a potentially sensible, moderate leader of the Liberal Party in the future. But if he doesn't have a seat, he ain't going to be doing that, and it'll be Dutton in charge.
I've seen on my social media a lot of Sally McManus news,
Yeah.
which I'm not displeased about. I need to find out a bit more about her, I think.
I hope that one day she makes a transition into politics because she seems quite sensible.
She seems quite, I don't know. I get the feeling she seems to be a little more motivated, and she definitely seems to have the right kind of politics. So,
Yeah. Could be a good thing for the world, or Australia at least, anyway.
yeah, that's right. Well,
I'm out of stories, by the way. That's me done. With
that's me done.
The only thing I was going to mention that I want to collect your thoughts on is that last week once again it was Anzac Day, and I always have trouble with Anzac Day, and I'm just wondering. I think I've mentioned this in years gone by, but just wondering what your guys' thoughts on Anzac Day are in this year.
My favourite of our public holidays, actually.
Yeah.
I think it's really nice that we have a public holiday which is about remembering the futility of war and the people that have been lost, rather than celebrating.
I'm not sure if people are getting the same message.
Yeah, that's
no,
what
I know, but it's what it's supposed to be about.
Yeah, it's interesting because it came up on one of my podcasts where it's an American podcast, and they just talk about what holidays are on the day that they're doing their podcast, and they go Anzac Day, and they had, what the hell's that? And they started trying to Google it, and they're going, is this a good holiday or a bad one? They couldn't quite figure out themselves, and then I was thinking about it, and going, I'm not even sure whether it's good or bad. I'm thinking mostly bad. It's a little bit of a glorification of empire and building a little bit too much for my taste.
Well, and it's starting to irk me how slowly but surely this insistence that you have to revere the Anzac Day.
Oh yeah.
With no definitive definition as to what it is, other than revering people in uniform.
Yeah, and as the
superficially
original Anzacs are now all dead, they really do have to transition it into the incorporeal.
Yeah, I'm still confused as to the message that's being supported by Anzac Day.
Well, Dean's got one of the good ones, but unfortunately, I just don't think that's the way most people think about it. Anzac Day is the
I
one
mean,
where
it should be because it's in there with the "lest we forget" thing. Like it's implied quite heavily.
Yeah.
It's just maybe not as quite as well regarded by people who are not thinking it through. Maybe I don't know.
Mm.
Yeah, plus we still have troops overseas, so if we're going to be honouring the troops, what does that mean about the places they're at? I just don't know what the message is there.
Mm.
Mm.
To me, it seems like it's this sort of doubling down on don't question. Well, it's the whole government push for, well, the government supporting the notion of utter reverence for Anzac Day is that therefore we don't question our military actions in
Yeah.
foreign countries, and that's what concerns me about Anzac Day.
Yeah, and the fact that we can have troops deployed, and even on Anzac Day, no one really raises that question and goes, hang on, why is this? Yeah, I don't know.
The other things, this might Dean won't know about this necessarily, but you know, we're fanboys of the Majority Report, and I was just listening to the part where Sam Cedar announced he had separated from his wife, and now that's of little relevance to our listening audience, but it was one of those things that generally I wouldn't care about such things, but when you devote yourself to listening to a show and you become sort of personally attached to a host.
Yeah.
Its structure is quite weird, but
you listen to almost daily.
Yes.
So, and the fact that it has gone on since the beginning of the year, and he hadn't actually said anything about it. It's like, oh wow, yeah, it would have been weird if he'd started referring to it and hadn't actually told anyone. It would have just been a bit weird.
And you know, it was awkward for me to listen, as he mentioned. It was awkward for him to have to mention it, and I was like, "This is quite awkward." You know, quite strange because usually I don't give a shit about personalities and their private lives. We couldn't care less. But it was like
one of the funny moment came out of it where some guy raised the there's a messenger that sends messages into the show on their instant messages app. Anyone can send him, but one of them in particular is called Sam's Tinder profile.
Oh no!
And everyone was going, yeah, you have no idea how funny that really was when they were coming through.
Oh no! So yeah, that was strange. Just I thought I'd mention that. Yeah, as I said, I've been buried in working 7 days a week for the last 2 weeks, so I haven't had much of an opportunity to sort of keep. I've sort of been casually keeping abreast of the news as things go by.
I mean, it's probably one of those things like when Barnaby Joyce announced to Parliament. You know, he was making speeches like, "Oh, and by the way, I split from my wife." You don't want to talk about it, but you kind of have to sort of, you know, at some point,
Has
like,
to be said. There's a big change.
Something. You know, you can't be like, I don't want people to call me out, and it's like the news is coming from me, I guess, but painful maybe to speak of.
Yeah.
I mean, when this individual Sam mentioned it, I was, you know, I had this notion of I feel sorry for him that he's separated from his wife. I don't know. Maybe he was quite happy to leave his wife. I know nothing about the circumstances, but this weird, because I'm a sort of, I didn't realize I was actually emotionally attached to this broadcast until he mentioned it, and I felt, you know,
poor Sam.
Poor Sam, and like I don't know the circumstance. He could have been a real dick to his wife. Who knows?
Maybe exactly.
I found that quite funny. The other thing I was going to mention, this is touching back to something Dean mentioned about the seemingly good news that Kim Jong-il, is it Il or Un? Un is extending the hand of peace. Now, what was interesting on this same show, they talked a little bit about what does that mean in reality, because, you know, and this is one of the things they dug into, is that there's no real there's no reality for them to actually see this out or consummate the peace deal, because their whole regime has to revolve around them not being open, about being totally closed, to have total control of the population. Otherwise, they're out. Any sort of movement towards opening their society in close relations to South Korea does not help to support their regime unless, and as they said, South Korea plays along to help prop up their regime, which I found very interesting.
I think they'd still remain an influential family. They're obviously
well,
the
I mean,
family in
they're not just the family. I mean, obviously, there's probably a whole bunch of landowners and property owners up there, and that in their internal politics, and I guess there's been ways that the landed people can hold on to things like that when they transition. It's happened before, I think. Anyway.
I mean, look what happened when Russia broke up. Sorry,
Yeah, that's
USSR
right.
broke up.
Oligarchs. Just
You don't even have to be. You just have to be holding stuff at the end. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, but that was a bit
music
different.
chair's over, and I've got a seat full of fucking submarines.
You,
Okay,
you
guess
didn't,
these are mine then.
but you didn't have a cult of
right.
personality family ruling the country. It was just the party. So when it dispersed, it was just a mad scramble for resources. Whereas you've got a ruling party and the cronies behind them who are tightly controlling power as individuals.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
that,
they'd probably rather it go down this way when they're still controlling as much as they can than go down the other way. I miss
They go
it
down
was pressure from
violently, yeah.
China. They were like, look, you're either doing this or we're going to have to remove you and get someone else in that will do it.
Oh, another thing we didn't mention is that the American naval chief who came out and said pretty much the South China Sea is lost. That the Western powers cannot dislodge China
Oh,
from
yeah.
them.
Not without going to war. They can't, and not one of these pathetic little let's pretend it's a war, a proper war.
So it's interesting to see whether these little flights of fancy that Australia, Great Britain and America are doing to maintain the notion that they're free channels of ocean-going lanes.
But
Well, it
I mean,
still is a free channel. It's just that China's going to be the one doing the protection in the area.
yeah,
I
I
don't think
quite
it's the
get
end of
it.
the world.
I don't quite get it. Is there some problem with who is patrolling that particular area? I don't know. They're not going to stop. China's not going to stop ships leaving with their goods, right?
Well, no. Well,
No.
they're starting to insinuate that the right of passage is purely at the behest of China. It's a permission granted by China as opposed to the just open sea lanes.
Yeah.
Well, we've had a default one for the US everywhere else, pretty much, haven't we? So,
Yeah. I don't see it as that. I don't see it as that big a deal. As long as as long as China continue to be relatively
yeah.
peaceful,
But
like
actually,
they have
I
been
guess
for a while.
the question we've got to ask is why Australia and our people think it is a big deal. You know what I mean? Because I don't think it's a big deal either.
Well,
But
we
but
don't.
clearly-
But when we did we sent up an envoy of ships up to Vietnam, and we were challenged along the way.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the incident's been played down, but in what is considered by, wasn't the United Nations? I can't remember what the organisation in particular that governs
so
the
when,
free
when was that?
sea
Because
lane.
that would be
Not-
really interesting to see how
about a
the
month ago?
Chinese media presented that.
Well, they presented as they had a professional interchange with the Australian Navy.
Did it even make the news in China? Is what I'm wondering.
Don't know.
Like Australia testing these boundaries just in a ever so subtle way. It's just like, we're going to send some ships up there. What are you going to do? Oh, you're going to ask us what we're doing here. Okay, fair enough. You know
Yeah,
what I
I
mean?
mean, it doesn't seem that bad. Like if you're out there, you're a military ship, you run into some other military ships, they open communications to you and they're like, hey bro, what are you doing here? And you're like, oh, we're just passing through Vietnam. And they're like, all right, have a good day.
Yeah, so it made news here is somewhat, but did it make news up? Did they even notice it? It was like,
I think it makes news here because the media or / the government want it to make news.
yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Like, oh my God, China's calling us out. It's like, well, is that a bad thing?
And I'm just wondering if China even noticed. That's all.
Oh no, they noticed, but not maybe the domestic audience didn't notice. But
When they had,
No, but yeah, that's what I mean. It made our news. Did it make their news?
No, probably not.
They didn't give a shit.
No.
when they had Xi Jinping on the deck of a Chinese aircraft carrier out in the South China Sea, where they had a fleet basically capable as an American one, but much closer to land with much less supply lines, and then anti-aircraft batteries on the reclaimed islands. At that point in time, I was like, there's no fucking way this is not just China's sea lanes now. That was pretty much saying, and we're in charge.
Indeed.
That's right.
We have a fleet the same size as your carrier group, and we have anti-aircraft within the area.
I am pretty
in
nervous
touch.
because it does seem pretty obvious that both sides are trying to tool up, right? The Chinese
Yeah,
have been playing catch up for a long time, and the Americans have definitely been talking about new expenditures and all sorts of
America's
stuff.
addicted to the most of their industry they have these days is military hardware.
Yeah.
They don't do much else. So
So an uptick there is barely even going to be noticed. But the Chinese have been pretty much, well, they've been producing a proper navy for a long time now. So
Yeah.
Well, the other interesting thing about that dispute over the South China Seas is that pretty much China said, "Fuck you" to all the other neighbours. We don't acknowledge your claim to any of that space there. It's all ours.
yeah, but it's not called the North Philippine Sea, is it? It's called the fucking South China.
But have you seen the boundary they drew? It pretty much goes right up to the coastline of Vietnam, Brunei, Philippines. It's like, no, you don't have any
Yeah.
Sea there.
Well,
It's all ours.
Putin,
It's called the
Putin
South
got away
China
with it
Sea.
with Crimea, so China figures, why the fuck not?
Well, it's
I
not.
has it.
Obviously, those.
Possession is 9/10 of the law, you know.
Yeah. Well, that's all I've got.
Same here.
Yeah, fair enough.
All right, folks. Thanks for listening. This is the show cutting off in T minus